English translation 612th contact Wednesday, the 11th of February 2015, 22:31 hours.
Hello, you are already waiting? Welcome and greetings, Ptah, dear friend.
Greetings also to you, Edward, dear friend. You had Njana call me to clarify something that we apparently forgot when we decided about the timeouts.
That is so, yes, because when considering this matter, some uncertainties have arisen as to why I then addressed the relevant questions to you via Njana, precisely with regard to the threefold possibility of a timeout from the internal core group obligations in the course of 7 years, as well as with regard to a longer duration than 7 years, if for example a long or temporally unlimited work obligation exists abroad.
As I was told by Njana, there have indeed been ambiguities in this regard. Timeouts are fixed for the following, as I explained at the 597th official contact conversation on the 25th of September 2014. 1. Disease of a protracted form 2. Vocational training 3. Further education school study 4. Stay abroad for a longer period of time 5. Existence construction 6. Care of the sick, etc. 7. Official and military duties 8. Self-recognition 9. Performance of obligations of an unavoidable nature 10. Longer work obligation 11. Change of attitude 12. Conflict of conscience. These 12 points thus clarify the possibilities for timeouts, which on the one hand are limited to 7 years and can possibly be divided into 3 different times, which means that the 7 years can be applied for 3 times if necessary, such as 1x 1 year, 1x 2 years, and 1x 4 years. A 4th extension should not be granted, which would follow if a request were made, rejected, or an exclusion would have to be made if a further timeout was insisted on. The reason for this is that in such a case one must normally reckon with a hopelessness, precisely with regard to the fact that no work and residence fixation or self-discovery, etc., can take place, which would ultimately burden the core group members and thus also the mission. If it is not a question of vocational training, which can very well be carried out at 3 different times, then there is either a lack of effort or maltreatment in some form, which can be manifold. It is very unlikely that it would take more than 7 years. For example, in relation to vocational training or a knowledge-based further training course at a school or university, etc. This is very unlikely. If one considers that one also has to work for the cost of living, because everything in this relationship depends on wages and therefore on financial means, therefore nobody can afford more than 7 years without paid work. This is at least the case with terrestrial people, who do not have extraordinary financial means at their disposal, so that they have to pursue a regular and remunerative job for their livelihood and personal needs.
That's all clear, but it doesn't say anything about my question when a timeout needs to be taken that requires an absence of more than 7 years.
That's right, because I haven't explained that yet. It was necessary to convene our committee again in this regard in order to clarify the matter, namely with regard to the timeouts which are work-related and unlimited and therefore do not fall within the 7-year range, according to which the core group membership can also be maintained indefinitely beyond the fixed timeout of more than 7 years, whereby, however, the regulated contribution obligations apply. When we decided on the 12 points, we did not take this possibility into account, because we did not consider it, but it is necessary and, consequently, it has now been decided for such cases that longer breaks can and must be possible, and that the whole thing should be recorded under 2 other points as points. 13. A contractually agreed obligation to work abroad for an indefinite period outside a radius of 250 kilometers from the mother center. 14. Contractually agreed foreign employment obligation for an indefinite period outside Europe. In order to grant timeouts in accordance with these 2 points 13 and 14, timeout participants should be obliged to maintain regular contact with the mother center and the core group members, at fixed intervals, although this may be reasonable on a monthly basis. Only in this way can contact be maintained as well as the exchange of necessary information regarding the mission and everything else that arises. Contractual and long-term foreign employment obligations should apply from a radius of 250 kilometers as the crow flies from the mother center. What is under this trademark can very well be the obligation of at least the monthly general meetings in the parent center be respected, unless special circumstances prevent this.
Well, that's for sure. 250 kilometers radius is 500 kilometers radius. 250 kilometers would mean about Zurich, Munich. But now we already have a case which arises with Natan and which, according to your explanation, is estimated to fall under point 14. How should we handle it now? This on the one hand, and on the other hand, the question arises whether these points also fall under the rule of 3 beans. Also, Christian K is a special case, and in my opinion he actually falls under point 13, because he lives outside the 250 kilometers radius of the center due to his work.
No, that should not be the case, because the 3-time application rule is to apply only to the first 12 points in the 7 years, because it concerns short-term or short-term leave, which is limited to a total of 7 years.
In my opinion, it should also be there that regular contact with the core group members must be maintained in the center.
This should, of course, be a prerequisite and a duty,
which has so far been observed by all timeout participants. Then the matter is clarified, so I can come to another matter, namely the title for Guido's book. We talked about it at the general meeting, but nothing came out. So Bernadette and I talked about it again, and ended up with the simple title, Universal Diversicum, or simply, Diversicum.
This can, of course, be done according to your condition, for I do not insist on the titles that I have proposed. But I would like to request that the subtitle proposed by me be used as an appendix, which should be preceded by all sorts of things around the topics, so that the subtitle then reads as follows. All kinds around the topics, results, calculations, Billy Edward Albert Meier, data, explanations, experiences, conditions, Playarin, realities, facts, beamships, facts, universe, relations, etc.
Of course, there's no problem with that.
I want this subtitle because it says something meaningful.
I can understand that. My next question relates to so-called alienation. That is to say, to a psychosis which is rare from a medical point of view and which, to my knowledge, is based on people becoming strangers, especially with regard to alienation between children and parents, but also with regard to events, things, or situations. The question was put to me by a woman from Germany about Elizabeth, so that I could answer it, because the woman, who is in psychiatric treatment, obviously suffers from alienation. The woman has been known to me for years through an exchange of letters that I had with her before I had to hand over this correspondence to Elizabeth because I could no longer devote myself sufficiently to my actual mission work. Since you are also versed in earthly medicine, psychology, and psychiatry, I thought that you could help me with a somewhat more detailed explanation, understandable for us laymen, than I could do. It doesn't have to be a technical paper.
Of course I can, but it's supposed to be one of the rare exceptions. Alienation is in fact a rare form of psychosis that occurs as an alienation between parents and child. This alienation syndrome is about the fact that, when it comes to parents and child, the child permanently and wrongly insults, and disparages and annihilates one or the other parent, rarely both. There are 3 different levels of alienation, one weak, one medium, and one severe, although it should be noted that the extent of the 3 levels may increase as the alienation factors usually increase over time. As a rule, the whole thing is the result of incorrect educational treatment by which the child is treated, disregarded, or abused in any way by one parent or both parents. Another possibility is that the parents constantly argue with each other, damaging the child's psyche and turning the child away from one or the other parent or both parents as a result of fear and hatred, etc., in such a way that alienation occurs. Such alienation can also be the result of divorce, where the child takes the side of one parent and turns away from the other. If there is a dispute about the right of custody or contact in a divorce, this can also be a trigger for alienation, which can be related to one parent as well as to both. This is achieved by one parent or both being criticized and devalued by the child and being considered hateful by the child, with no thoughts of guilt and feelings of guilt on the part of the child regarding the behavior towards the alienated parent. It also becomes apparent that when the alienated parent is devalued, his family, acquaintances, and friends are also included in the alienation and considered with hatred, whereby absurd and silly reasons are given for the devaluation and hatred. And what is still to be said refers to the fact that earthly medicine, psychiatry, and psychology are still very ignorant and inexperienced in relation to alienation psychosis and have not yet gained much knowledge in this regard. Consequently, they are still not able to judge the effective facts of this psychosis today.
I can imagine that. But what about the events, things, and situations in relation to alienation?
In short, it means that a person, not only children, but also adults, develops unrestrained hatred for an event, a thing or a situation through some evil, negative, bad, or awkward circumstance such as suffering, disadvantage, harm, and grief, etc., which results in alienation. So this happens equally with regard to parents or parents, but also with regard to other and even strangers, with whom a reason for alienation is found. Whereby, however, in any case, every reason is always wrong, because inevitably a consciousness-thought emotional damage is caused, which very quickly degenerates into psychosis.
I imagined it to be something like this. I forgot to tell you that we can't use the new automatic stack cutter. In my opinion, there is a construction error. Therefore, it was unusable for us and was replaced today by another tailor, namely by the same semi-automatic model, which we already had before. This now works correctly. What if you want to take a look at it too? But Daniel Lutz has already worked with the device for about 2 or 3 hours.
I will take that opportunity to examine and photograph it when we have finished our conversation.
I wonder why you photographed the previous device and now want to do it with the new one.
The purpose is to archive all your equipment and machines necessary for you, the mission, and for the construction and maintenance of the center, as well as for the management of fields, paths, and forests. We have also recorded the work with the equipment, devices, and machines in action since the very beginning in the center, both with all the group members and with you, when you were using the Caterpillar machine. Billy. Loader crawler for earth moving with rear excavator and the excavator. You have excavated the biotope and worked the pulpit lacquer in the garden with the tractor and the rotary. Cultivator note rotary cultivator and plowed the snow with the snow plow note snow plow, and the rotary cultivator has thrown away the snow. All that we have photographed, we have of course presented to our peoples on ERA and also treated in public discussions. Because the whole was completely foreign to our peoples, both in terms of earthly techniques, as well as your work with only one arm and your tireless commitment. Our peoples could not imagine that, so the whole thing was only comprehensible to them by showing them the records.
You never told me anything about that.
But what happened now?
Then I can also mention, because I was asked how the development of the transmitter gate actually proceeded, that you and Quetzal, when you come here, have been walking into my office through your latest achievement for quite some time, just through the transmitter gate. This is in contrast to Florina and Njana, who still appear here by beam.
There are no other possibilities in their aircraft, although the existing ones are fully sufficient.
Of course, that's all it takes. Sometimes I'm tempted to get through the transmitter gate into your giant room again or into Quetzal's area, but I can get stuck because I don't necessarily need it, and it also creates problems for me.
You've already been with me and Quetzal twice in this way, and you could do it again, but you once told me that you don't want to go on because it burdens you.
Yeah, that's right, and in an unpleasant way. Sometimes I would like to feel somehow in a different climate than the one that prevails here on Earth. By that I mean the oscillatory climate that prevails in your country. But unfortunately, it always happened when I was with you that it wasn't easy for me to return, because everything here on Earth always had such a depressing effect on me when I came back. This was already the case in 1975, when I was on the great journey with you and Sim Ya-se, as always when I could get into your aircraft. Similar things happened to me as a boy when I was taken away from Earth by your father Shvath, although at that time things were not as bad as they are today, because the vibrations that reign on Earth have effectively become malignant.
Which I can understand well, and also understand why you want to stay in your workroom and not switch back and forth through the gate.
It cannot be denied that I feel good and comfortable in my office, but nevertheless it is something different when I come to you where there is peace, freedom, and harmony, and I have to return to this earthly world where everything is so full of deceit, disharmony, jealousy, hatred, war, crime, lies, mismanagement, murder, sectarianism, deception, terror, manslaughter, lack of freedom, discord, injustice, crime, slander, betrayal and destruction, etc. Every time I came back from you, I was always psychologically restless because a strange ache had befallen me. Fortunately, after all the dirty intrigues from my own family circle have struck me, then the rest of my family is still there that I have left, as well as all the core group members around me who are always reachable for me and who are helpful to me, through their mere presence or continued presence, and help me through their presence in conversations about the mountain of psychological pressure. The same happens with regard to passive members who telephone me, write letters, cards, faxes, or emails, and thus convey a lot to me that helps me to get back on my feet again and again. With this, I can then find myself back into earthly reality and adapt to it again. But I think it is better if I just stay here and communicate with you here, because this is possible for you, and does not create any problems as a result of being able to shield and protect yourselves against all the negative and bad earthly human vibrations.
I also feel good and comfortable in your workroom, as well as elsewhere on the premises of the center, which is unfortunately not the case elsewhere on Earth in the given way, because in the center area there is a special oscillating climate, as you call it. Only through the very bad and even malignant vibration which is generally known to me on Earth can I understand what thoughts and feelings, and consequently what is going on in you with regard to your psychic impulses. For my part, I don't want to live on Earth like none of us do, because we can't bear all the negative and bad as well as very malicious vibrations that are radiated by Earth humans and thus impregnate the atmosphere, which is why we have to shield ourselves from them, which fortunately isn't the case with you because you know how to control and neutralize them. Very often I think that it must be really hard for you to live in all these evil, earthly human vibrations and to fulfill your mission.
Sometimes it is really difficult for me to cope, especially with the sectarian vibrations of Earthlings, as well as the brutality and indifference of the people among each other, the lack of modesty, helpfulness, and charity, as well as the lack of love, humanity, the lack of love for each other, and the lack of understanding, also with regard to nature, the planet, and the entire fauna and flora, which are all thoughtlessly and emotionlessly disregarded and destroyed by Earthlings.
From your voice, I hear bitterness and sadness at the same time. I think it is better that we do not have these unpleasantness, because there is something else we can talk about. Let me say, therefore, that once again I am to bring you heartfelt greetings from Ikarina, Asket, Nera, Plagia, and Sim Ya-se, as well as from many others who know you. They all wish you much joy, peace, health, and a deep happiness.
Pay them all my dear thanks. I also greet them and wish them all the best.
You know my thoughts and emotions in relation to you, therefore I join the words which I had to direct to you from all those mentioned. And I also want to assure you that I will come here at any time if that is possible for me and you call me. The technique that is now at our disposal allows me to come to you at any time, which is always a great joy to me, if I am not kept from an importance that would prevent me from coming here.
You mean with the technology at your disposal, the transmitter gate, right? With this technique, you don't need any more time, or just as much as you need to go through it.
Of course, that's what I am talking about. and this technique also makes me independent of time. But now, dear friend, I would like to exchange some personal words with you and then also still look at the new cutter and capture it figuratively.
Then we can first have a look at the new stack cutter. And if there's anything that needs to be discussed, I will call Florina or Injana. Then let's go to the printers now.